Okay, welcome to the special committee of the whole meeting. It's September 3rd, about 11:05. Andy, would you call the roll?
Russell. Here. Todd.
Here.
Posh.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Larson. Here. Kuda.
Here. All right, the topic today is ARPA, and we have with us the planning director, Xanth, who's going to take us through the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Council. Good morning. Happy post Labor Day. And we've got the team here of the law department, both the law director, assistant law director, assistant director Norio, and finance director Schuster, along with Director Klinkscale, and really talk and walk you through a pretty detailed presentation we have about ARPA and even the previous council, and you've got the former president here, you guys spent a lot of time talking about our great not-for-profits, and not a lot of time has been spent on the city projects and initiatives, as well as the council proposed project initiatives. So we hope today that we can focus on walking through those, because we're really excited about the things that we can do with the ARPA funding, but we have to make some decisions on those, and that's why we're really thankful that you took the initiative to set this work session, because really that's what it is. It's let's work together to get to a point so that we can use these ARPA funds really effectively and efficiently. So, like I said, we've got a pretty detailed presentation here. We want to, of course, just remind everybody about the timelines and the deadlines, talk about the goals that we're hopeful to get out of this, touch on revenue replacement, which is a big part of the conversation, and eligible uses, i.e. the buckets that are available, and then really dig into the city housing projects, which I know a lot of you have been interested in, and then also the economic development program, return to revenue replacement budget, because we've got some restrictions there, talk about other city projects, including public works and parks and properties, touch on your council projects, and then just give you an update on some of the not-for-profit housing projects that would be StartRight and Future Heights. And then ultimately make some recommendations for potential reallocation. We did want to touch on Ordinance 92 of 2021, which is the geographic ordinance that you all passed. It's the first one. And then we really have a call to action before next steps, which is going to say, hey, can we move forward on some of these things? And if not, let's figure out how to move forward. Then talk next steps, and then Q&A. We've set it up this way because there's a lot to go through. Obviously, if you have a question along the way, feel free to ask it, but it's sort of all woven together. So each slide sort of relates to the previous one. So if you do ask a question in between, the answer might be wait 1 or 2 slides. So what do we want to do? We want to focus on the city project. Perfect, thanks. And get an okay to move forward on those. We want to make recommendations for revenue replacement, because those types of things really have to happen soon. We want to give you an update on other city projects and the nonprofit housing projects, discuss your council projects, recommendations for reallocation, and then start to talk about what to do with available or reallocated funds. Again, this is all very, very much time sensitive. I just want to make a note that we tried to put numbers on each of the slides. So if you have a particular question about a particular slide, just make reference, it's on the bottom right. So just as a reminder of the ARPA timeline, and this is important, not so that we dwell on the past, but so that we understand what we need to do going forward. March 11th was when ARPA was signed into law by President Biden, and council moved relatively quickly over a 5-month period, 5.5-month period, with that first ordinance, which was 92/2021 about the geographic allocations. And you see there's an asterisk there because over time, I'd say over the past 2.5 years, periodically council has spoken about refining that ordinance, but that never happened in the end. Ultimately, that may be something that needs to happen going forward. The first real substantive ordinance was 140/2021, which was the 18 million for the sewer project, which was a little bit later in 21. And then early in 23, there was the allocation for the police vehicles. Then we had the ice rink, King Park Stramp, and then at the very end of last year was the large allocations in two ordinances, 179 and 194. Beginning in this year was when the administrative effort began, and that's when we were working and engaging with Guidehouse. I won't dwell on that too much, but a lot of that work was focused on nonprofit. But it's really been only since June and July that the administration has been working honestly really hard on the city side projects. And that's particularly because we had Bricker Grader on board to help us determine eligibility. So there's been a lot of work happening in the past couple of months, in addition to everything that's happened over the past couple of years. So just as a reminder, I'm going to skip the first bullet for a second, but the ARPA deadlines are December 31st is when all contracts have to be executed. And that would include any reallocations, bidding, contracting that needs to happen for you guys at council level. And oh, by the way, you have a budget that you need to adopt, and a lot of these decisions probably need to factor into that budget. So that's why we've set an internal deadline of October 31st to have all of that stuff completed, because that gives us and you the opportunity to make changes if those need to happen, and also allows 1 and 2 and maybe even 3 readings to happen prior to the budget cycle. And then December 31st of 26, 2 years later, is when all funds need to be expended. So you'll see a lot of our conversation today is about those bottom 2 deadlines, but you should have in mind that first deadline as we talk about some of the projects and some of your projects. So revenue replacement, and maybe, I don't know, Tara or Brian, if you want to handle this one, but it's important to understand what revenue replacement is and the different aspects of revenue replacement.
I think Chris would.
Well, essentially, revenue replacement was one of the expenditure categories that through which the U.S. Treasury is allowing small state, local governments to use funds without the majority of restrictions under ARPA, under the justification that it goes without saying that states, local governments lost tax revenue as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as a result, the only real restrictions that then apply to the use of revenue replacement funds is that, with certain exceptions of the federal regulations that still apply to procurement and spending and purposes, really state law is what's going to govern what constitutes a legitimate government purpose for the purposes of using revenue replacement funds.
Yeah, is there a formula that the federal government uses for loss for taxes during COVID?
There is, but so you could go through this entire formula and set out your justifications for the number that you come up with, or you could use their default $10 million assessment. And the city of Cleveland Heights, I believe, when would that have been, 2021?
2021.
The assessment,
Yeah.
the final one was done last year.
Okay, so then it would have been last year that the city opted to go with the $10 million allotment. That would have allowed for a larger revenue replacement expenditure than just going through the formula.
And we wanted to point out here, because this has even been confusion amongst ourselves.
I'm sorry, one more question. If you went through the formula and the formula was greater than 10 million, you could take that 10 million as well? Okay, thank you.
So this 10 million is out of the 38 million. It's not in addition to. So there's an ability to sort of pull out 10 million, use that as revenue replacement, and leave 28 million left over. So there's not, again, we had these conversations ourselves. It's not 38 million plus 10. So just as a reminder, you're paying for it one way or another. So here are the buckets as we talk about the eligible uses, and I think Jeff Harris from Bricker and even Guidehouse before that spoke about these really well. But just as a reminder, the first bucket is direct responses to the health emergency or negative economic impacts. That's where a lot of our ARPA stuff is falling into, but you have to prove that it is responding to COVID-19 or economic impacts. Premium pay was number 2. Number 3 is reduction in revenue, which is revenue replacement. 4 is water, sewer, and broadband, highlighting the sewer part, but we also want to highlight the water part as well for conversations later on. Number 5 and number 6 are relatively new. 5 is for relief from natural disasters. And number 6 is certain infrastructure projects. This is where we spoke about surface transportation, which will come up, I think, as we talk about.
Question, are we doing anything regarding broadband at all? Or we're just doing sewer and water?
Well, there is some aspects of some of these projects that we may be looking at broadband, which will come up a little bit later.
I know our city has a lot of dead zones, so I was just wondering about if there's any aspiration for us doing anything with broadband.
So let's come back to that one in a couple of slides.
Thank you.
For clarification, aside from the revenue replacement, which is limited to 10 million, do any of these other buckets have limits on how much can be spent in those areas? Okay.
Surface transportation does.
Okay.
So I'm going to turn a lot of this part over to Brian. We want to essentially propose to you what we want to do with the funding that you've allocated for these city housing projects. Again, we haven't had an opportunity to really have these conversations with you, so we're excited about sharing with them. And the idea here is we want to supplement existing programs that we already have. We sort of know that the gaps that we have in our current funding and how this ARPA funding can be built out. So,
Sure. So many of you were at Councilperson Pasha's committee meeting last Monday, so we went over this a little bit, but for those that weren't, I'll start off by saying, and you'll see in a later slide, that we're trying to minimize the amount of funds going to the revenue replacement category because there's some standards for correct or a benchmark of the correct amount that should be going to revenue replacement, and we want to try to hit that target. So you'll see that theme in these housing project descriptions. So we're proposing for Lead Safe programming, there's $1 million allocated, half of that for additional lead clearance activities from our Lead Safe rental registration program. And the other half would be for healthy homes and lead-based paint hazard remediation. So the city normally operates a Lead Safe Cuyahoga grant from the County Department of Health. And that program is paired with the Healthy Homes program. We've actually run out of Healthy Homes funding, which is health and safety repairs to sort of support the lead safe work that's going on in these homes. So we're asking to allocate half of that to a similar type program where we just lump them together in a sort of umbrella. We think we could easily spend $100,000 this year, so that much would not be going to revenue replacement. Because we've had projects go forward that didn't get that Healthy Homes component. So there's projects that are waiting to receive some additional funding. The rest of it since we're doing this in-house, we would need to categorize it as revenue replacement.
But that $400K could be done by 2026.
Correct.
For the 500,000 that's designated for clearance testing rebate, would you have to have that contracted by the end of 2024 with any of those remediators?
Yes. So anything that's not revenue replacement that's city run would need to be contracted by the end of the year.
So maybe that'll hustle up the contracts a bit for those folks that are asking.
Yeah, so
if
the
completed.
contracts have gone out for the first round, which was Ohio ARPA funds, and that whole process has sort of fleshed itself out, so it should be much quicker the second time around.
Okay, thank
Much
you.
quicker, yeah.
Is there any risk of that $600,000, the 500 on the top line and the 100 to be encumbered, of not getting those contracts done by December 31st?
I don't see a risk as long as, the contracts get approved from council in the normal way. Yeah. I think
Okay.
from our end, I don't think there's an issue.
That, yeah, and it would be done by the October 31st timeframe.
so.
That's
Yeah.
that's the whole goal, I would assume.
Yeah, once we get the go-ahead, I think we could have those clearance projects probably done by the end of the September, mid-September probably. Just because we put an RFP out, wait for response.
Perfect, thank you.
One question before you leave. Have you estimated how many units we'll be able to test with that $500,000?
I did, and I calculated that on my phone at the last committee meeting. But really, it's a portion. It's not gonna serve every single rental unit. So
Wasn't it 600? I think it was 660 or something.
333, so combined it'd be about 666,
Thank you.
67, I'll say.
So again, that's Lead Safe, all in-house with our HPO office. Next up is down payment assistance.
Right, so we normally have a contract with Home Care Research Center to operate our down payment assistance program, which is funded through home funds. It's a funding program. In consultation with HRC, they believe let's say a quarter of the funds, or maybe that's 20%. 20% of the funds would be realistic to spend by 2026. I think they're being conservative because they don't want the risk of returning any funds to the treasury. So the remainder would be revenue replacement, so they have a little bit longer time to get those projects done. Now, there's two types of revenue replacement that we'll be talking about. Ones that have to get done by 2026 and ones that may not, depending on how the city funds them. So we'll probably get into that later. We'll get to the revenue replacement slide.
For clarification, revenue replacement dollars, do those not have to be spent by the end of 2026?
They do.
They do.
Okay,
They do, but the mayor's thrown out there before in the past, I believe, so that we could pay for some other city expense and free up general fund
okay,
money to.
that could then satisfy this beyond 2026.
Right, so that first purpose, whether it's payroll or something, would be fulfilling the 2026 deadline.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
So I just want to say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So instead of asking on every slide, can I go with the assumption that when you're making these presentations to us, that there is essentially no risk of us losing that money? I mean, you've already allocated it, you're going through a process, it's gonna come to us. Because, I kind of feel like I have to ask, are we at risk for losing this have you already done all the stuff behind?
Right.
So we're on track for this October 31st.
So committing it with HRC will fulfill that encumbrance, but you're right, there always is a risk.
We didn't know
Yeah.
the other organizations that they're not gonna be able to meet the deadline. I mean, we vet it all out as best we can, but there is always going to be a small risk,
We think it would be very small with this.
very.
I guess I'm looking for the small risk. It's on
Yeah.
a track. You guys have,
Minimal
it
risk.
sounds like a good process with a good group of folk that are sort of managing this list. But it's not like nothing's been done. It means that there's a process in place and you have every expectation between, this body's approval and your work. We're gonna,
I agree with that.
something's gonna be ready October 31st. Yeah, so I'm not gonna ask that question over and over and
Yeah.
over again, but just if there's gonna be some risk, please bring
Point
it
it out, yeah.
please bring it to light.
And one of the key objectives of the work of this group has been to ensure that every dollar is utilized and that none of them need to be returned.
Perfect, yeah. Thank
So, speaking with Director Keisha Allen, HRC Director, it's a kind of shockingly low number of people who are applying for this down payment assistance. What I'm wondering is there anything the city can do to assist in the promotion of this program?
Sure, of course.
Because I was surprised the last time I looked at the numbers.
Don't forget there'll be key differences between this program and the current program, or the program I think that just sunsetted. So this program, the household income is higher. I think it's 120% or 125%.
120% of
Versus
AMI.
80%. So that really opens up, that 40% difference really opens up the number of houses available, households available for this program. The other thing is with that higher income level, the purchase prices will likely be higher. And if we're doing a percentage of purchase price, that'll be larger chunks
I see.
of funds coming But the program specific guidelines, like, what percentage we're doing, that'll be fleshed out by the time the contract goes to council. Like max amount of subsidy, that sort of thing.
So this is down payment assistance, HRC, repeating that because now we come to exterior home repair, which is actually gonna be a combination of HRC and HPA.
So HRC has submitted a proposal to utilize $1 million of the $2.5 million that council has allocated. Their program focuses on emergency repairs and accessibility. They feel confident $250,000 of this will be spent by 26, the rest would be revenue replacement, just like the down payment assistance program. Home repair program, so HPO, the Housing Preservation Office, the city's Planning and Development Department, they currently have 2 programs, a home repair program and a senior home repair program. The home repair program is open to eligible households of all ages. A senior home repair program is limited to seniors and people with disabilities. This is proposing to supplement the $600,000 to the home repair program, so the one that's eligible for everybody. This will be revenue replacement because there's no way we would have this all under contract by the end of the year. Speccing out projects, finding the homes, that sort of thing.
Will this program design cover all the, stuff like garages and driveways and sidewalks and so
We
forth?
have another slide.
Okay.
So there's the one,
Oh my.
So this program, and we know from talking to the housing court, through talking to Dexter Buchanan, who deals with a lot of case management on our housing violations, the garages, sidewalks, driveways are in dire need of help in the city, particularly garages. CDBG rules prevent a lot of these projects from happening with CDBG. There's some limitations of what CDBG is allowed to be used for. With this being revenue replacement, it's likely that we would make this eligible, because there's a thing on there that says meet determine eligibility. If it's the revenue replacement where we're switching out payroll, for example, with and freeing up general fund money, we know that would be eligible. So that's the program I think you're referring to help people with some expensive problems that aren't necessarily housing literally because it's not on the house, but that's the nuance in CDBG, but we know it's important to keep people in their homes and affordable and all of that.
And is there like a percentage that the administration has come up with? Was it kind of a 50-50 or?
Of how much, of what?
Yeah.
I think we'd prioritize some long-standing housing violations that people just cannot afford to fix. People that are in housing court already. We did put some earmarks for geographic location.
Right.
That could be, debated. So I don't know if that answers.
Not exactly, because what I wanna know is when people apply for this or come, ask for this, are they still paying something, some portion of the repair?
Right, I think to make the dollars stretch, we usually require, but I would caution that we should have a caveat for people that cannot, just to get these homes in a good state for the neighborhood and the homeowner.
So in other words, we're gonna get legislation that's gonna have all this, the details in it.
I don't know if it needs legislation, but we will definitely communicate.
And what we'll need to do is develop rules and regulations, which we will,
Which you'll definitely be.
you'll see, I don't think you necessarily need to approve it, but we will share that with you as a program that you're funding through ARPA.
All right, go ahead.
So for clarification, the HRC program, is it in essence everything excluding driveway, sidewalk, pathway, and garage program? So those will be handled by HPO and then the other things would be handled by HRC? Is that sort of our intention?
Yeah, that's the original, I think that's the original intention, although it's nice when HRC, so a lot of times we do require homeowners to chip in and they can't. This happens all the time with CDBG and home projects. It's nice when HRC can step in and take care of that owner portion because if we could pull money out of thin air, we would.
And then those details would be hashed out with HRC in their contract?
Right, and that'll be the contract.
Okay.
That will be legislation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, okay, bye. Sorry.
So on the spreadsheet that I received when I guess, from the last version of council that approved all the expenditures, the exterior repair residential budget was 2.5 million. Looks like you're up to 3.5 right now. I just kind of assumed that
It's 900,000 plus 1.6 from the.
Because we're talking about revenue replacement, it seems like we're
This is how that number.
You may have added in the
Should
lead
have indented.
abatement, the lead clearance, the additional million for lead clearance.
just a separate.
Those together would be 3.5.
It's 2.5.
so
That's 900 there.
900
900 there plus all these.
And then
plus
the-
1 and
Well,
6.
Quarter and the 3/4 should be indented further,
Yeah,
because that 1 million for HRC
Yeah,
is
it's the
the million
million.
of
Thank you.
200,000, 750,000.
Tell me again what you're considering for eligibility.
120% of AMI.
Thank you.
It's the same as NSG if anyone remembers it. And then lastly, program delivery, we have some capacity issues that we would need to boost up some, at least temporarily, staff so we can get this money out as soon as possible.
So that's exterior home repair. So those are our housing projects. Now, equally, I think, exciting, but also concerning or interesting for you guys is the economic development program. And I know this came up at the last council committee of the whole. So we want to spend some time on this. And to Councilman Pasha's point from earlier, you'll see here, this is an area where we have some concerns about being able to spend the grants in time, which we'll talk about in a second. But we wanted to start with the economic development programming or funding that you provided is split into two parts. One
Next
is,
slide should be business assistance, again, just so you
Yeah. so the first bucket, not to use the same term as ARPA, but the first area is comprehensive planning. So there was $100,000 each for comprehensive planning dedicated to the Noble Road corridor and the Taylor Road corridors. And we have a slide. Okay, well, I'll talk about it here. So
It's on the next slide.
the comprehensive plan.
Oh, no.
So what we were thinking here, we have some specific things in mind. On Noble Road, we know that there needs to be a market study. One of the things we heard in our Noble corridor planning effort and then through the TWG mobility station was requests for information or understanding about what is actually the market there. So we think that an important thing would be to do market studies for the 3 nodes essentially, which is Noble Nila, Noble Monticello, and then Warrensville Triangle. And then some streetscape improvements, so actual things in the road to make a difference. That is equivalent to 100K for Noble. On Taylor, similar but different, also streetscape improvements to bolster up the things that we're seeing with the King Park project and the Oak Tree Vet and the Hebrew Academy, all that investment, so it's time to spruce up the road. But we also have a grant from NOACA, which is our MPO, for a road diet along South Taylor with our neighbors in University Heights. And what they have said and what ODOT has said is, well, you need to do a traffic study because the original study was done in 2018, 2019, it's so many years later. So we are proposing to use the remainder of the Taylor Road corridor funding to do that traffic study, otherwise it would have to come out of general fund. For all of this, we could encumber it by the end of the year. We would have RFPs out, select consultants, and then we would go through the typical procurement process to bring those people on board. If it's under 50K versus above 50K. And so that's the comprehensive planning part of this, which I think is probably less interesting to you than to the business assistance itself, which is the actual direct assistance. And there's really 3 options here, and we want to sort of do a pros and cons of those. So I'm going to start with, I guess we'll start on the left-hand side. our preferred approach, no, actually, the second one is our preferred approach. The first side there on the left is to utilize third-party firms out there that we use through CDBG and CDBG CV, which is emergency funds, particularly on our small business loan program, which is ECDI, there's the Urban League, and have them, essentially what we do is we contract with them, and then they do the process of having an application, vetting applicants, and ultimately granting the funds. So we, on the left, propose splitting that up and giving about 300,000 of the 1.2 million to those third parties. Again, RFP, ready to go. We can bring them on board before October 31st and get that money out the door. And then have the remainder, 900,000, administered by our department. In a way, we would do that through revenue replacement, which would allow us to actually develop a program over time, as opposed to having to meet a December 31st, 2024 deadline. So that is one approach. A second approach, which is on the top right, is to give all of it to the third party, which again is just sort of a slight variation of the left, but would be able to encumber it by the end of the year. And then we hope that they could get it all out the door by 2026. And then the last one, which is the one that I think we've all discussed a little bit here, and at the last meeting, it seemed like this is the direction that council was interested in investigating, is to essentially use the program that Bricker has developed in other places in Ohio, get an application form out there, have people apply, and have that all done through our department. And we've got a lot of concerns about that because, number one, it's a really short time frame we would have to do that. Essentially, I think we would have about 6 to 8 weeks to get an application out, to get people in, to vet them, and to get the money at least contracted with a lot of people potentially in the city. That's a burden not only on the planning department, but on the law department, on the finance department. And ultimately, we're not sure how many businesses we could really assist in that way because they're gonna have to prove that they were harmed by COVID-19. And if we're gonna be rushed in doing this by the end of the year, it's gonna be probably a lot of ineligible people. So that's why that might be the path of least resistance, but we think ultimately the least impactful way to approach this.
So I understand why that option would be the most likely to lead to losing funds. Just to back up a little bit, so Noble, for instance, that business district, that's been studied. There's all kinds of reports, and then more recently the planning department has done a study. So would I be naive in saying that we probably need less administrative costs on the planning end for that? Or, I mean, just because so much has been done already, what appears to be the planning part of
The comprehensive
Noble.
planning part of it,
Pardon?
the comprehensive planning part of it?
Yes.
Yeah, just to go back, so what we're, so on Noble, what we're proposing is less a planning effort, but a market study, which again, we don't have the raw data that we need to be able to say, oh, by the way, yeah, coffee shop, and then a second coffee shop.
Gotcha, right.
And then actual streetscape improvements. So we're gonna, streetscape design, which is stuff that's coming out of our comprehensive planning effort. So it's less planning and more sort of the next step.
And Taylor, I don't remember any particular study on that.
Taylor is, yeah, it's more that we have a bunch of development projects that have happened over time. And there's been some really good planning efforts related to the King Park Village project and the rezoning that we did.
Right, the rezoning should open things up.
So that's why we don't think we need to do traditional comprehensive planning in both of these cases, because we have already sort of done it in both places. We want to do something that's more tangible. So in that case, it's a traffic study and then also the streetscape design for South Taylor.
But the administrative costs could come down and that money could be shifted over.
Well, those would have to be revenue replacement because those types of efforts don't fall into any of the other buckets when you're doing planning, even if it's a streetscape design, even if it's a market study for something that's not, it doesn't fall into any of those other buckets. So it still has to be administratively done
Right,
through.
I get it.
If we could take a step back, in the December 18th legislation, the 1.2 million was broken down into 500,000 in grants for the Noble area, 500,000 in grants for the Taylor area, and 200,000 for the rest of the district. So regardless of which of these we choose, are you recommending that we stick with those portions, those proportions that were identified in the legislation, or just make it eligible to everyone and not limit it primarily to two districts?
Well, we wouldn't follow exactly that, but I think the proportion is what we're interested in. I mean, it goes back to the original legislation of,
Okay.
a certain portion going to Noble, a certain portion going to Taylor, and
Okay.
then the rest. So yeah, I think we wanna make.
That's all we can do, I mean,
But those earmarks could be
That,
Adjust, yeah.
and that's what we discussed during the entire ARPA feedback conversation, is the fact that the original legislation needed to be adjusted anyway, because the way that it's spelled out, it combined the Caledonia area and the Noble area all into one. In addition, it did nothing for the north side of Coventry, that entire area between Coventry and Superior as well, and some of the investment in that area. So one of the things that council was talking about and discussing over the last 2 years is what to do in terms with that legislation to make those adjustments, so that we're, number one, allocating some funds to that north side, which is hit way harder than even the Noble area right now, that Coventry Superior area there. And then that allocation for either clarifying what the allocation is for Noble or separating out that Caledonia portion that we discussed as well. So we've got to talk about that in terms of that legislation, if that's the route that we're going. But those were those key issues, is that when the previous council approved that, there was no allocation made at all for one whole portion of town that we needed to put investment in. It just didn't spell that out, so it would have to be correct.
well, in light of that, Chris, Hannah stepped out, right?
Stepped out.
Okay, we probably need, and maybe we could start the discussion about this on Thursday at our regular meeting, but we need to massage this geographic 2021 legislation, right? So, I mean, if you're hearing what Councilman Maddox said about North Coventry, which I'm sure we would be.
Well, I would recommend that we massage maybe the legislation I created for just that area, but add we're gonna have money that's going to be left that we're trying to put into another bucket. So use whatever revenues, once we go through all this, see what money is left, and then allocate some of that money to the Coventry area in a separate piece of legislation, so they have some money of their own.
But we do need to define the geographic.
No, I understand
Yeah.
that. I was not saying
Yes.
not to do
Go ahead.
I don't know exactly, but you may want to wait until the law director comes back and just get his opinion on that as well. You may not need to change the geographic determinations in that legislation at all. But the law director might have.
And just add North Coventry in a separate piece or something.
Or just allocate in the way that you think, if we're reallocating, then you allocate in the way that would provide that.
That's what I was saying. Reallocate, whatever we reallocate
Yeah.
to that area.
All right, go ahead.
You wanna ask the question of
Just go ahead.
Okay, so I don't see us as a body gravitating toward any three of these options. Is this your wish right now for us to pick one of these at this time? What is the ultimate goal right now?
Well, our ultimate goal is that we need to pick a path to move forward, the one that provides the least amount of risk and the ability for us to get it into contract.
at a minimum removing the third option.
Okay, so from my perspective, I think if I was a member of a former council that wanted this business assistance, I would be extremely disappointed that it's not available to us, but be as it may, I think this third option in the lower right corner is not gonna be doable in the moment of time that we have. And I think just from the process of of elimination, I would suggest we just eliminate that item and talk about the other two.
It's also important to note that anything that's not revenue replacement in this category can only assist businesses that show a loss. And they also show that they don't have other subsidies that made up for that loss, particularly the PPP program that you all remember. So in order to have the maximum impact in these commercial districts, we're recommending the first option, which has much less strings attached to what kind of incentives we can offer. Especially when we're like earmarking some of it for certain streets that need different things from other districts.
Could anyone who had a business in Cleveland Heights or any city and was not able to sustain that business during the COVID-19 and was truly eligible for COVID-19 money, could they come and still apply for that money, or is that horse is gone and left the carriage? Off the barn.
They would need to still be a business.
I don't know, I'm just asking,
Yeah, it's a good
I'm just
question.
curious,
Good
cause
question.
people may ask that question and I don't know what the answer is, so.
The business entity would need to be a going concern, so it would still need to be a valid entity. And yeah, they would need to be able to document that they were in business during, at least beginning on, was it March 31st, 2021? And then going forward up through whenever the emergency ended. So then during that period of time, if they were in business, then they could show that they incurred a loss, then they could be eligible for aid, but only up to the amount of harm that they suffered.
Not including other subsidies that they receive.
Correct, so if they did
I'm sorry, I didn't
receive,
hear you.
Other subsidies, so if they
Oh.
received a county grant or they received.
they received the PPP loan that was forgiven, which is likely the case if they went out of business because of the pandemic, then that would be a mitigating factor up to the point of disqualification.
Duplication of benefits. Duplication of benefits.
Okay.
As we talk about the revenue replacement bucket, just so that I understand what's already in there, am I understanding correctly that the police cars, the ice rink, and the Stramp are already in there?
We have a slide on it,
Okay.
we have it in all in detail, but you are correct so far.
So, Mr. Law Director, how do we make a decision? I mean, can this body make a decision on which one of these we want to do in this meeting? A recommendation would be probably.
I mean, I think that you can, because there aren't minutes generated, the practice of the body has been not to vote in these meetings. And I would recommend in general continuing to comply with that. But I guess I'm not certain that a decision is needed so much as getting a sense of council's wishes.
Okay,
Well, a decision meaning a vote
yeah. I understand.
and other possibilities.
Well, I certainly would go with the one that gives us the most flexibility, with the understanding that we already know we've taken a long time. I'm sure that we'll try to do the option with whatever option we all agree on as expeditiously as possible.
And I think the first one sort of jives with what, we've talked about, particularly when we talk about the Noble Corridor comprehensive planning effort. Offering incentives that kickstart the types of businesses that the residents want, rather than just supplementing losses from the pandemic.
Anybody have any different view on this? Go ahead.
I'm just gonna support what you said, what you mentioned. I mean, I think it goes to the greater good as opposed to just helping out individuals that it's gonna be very, very difficult to prove a level of loss, and I would even I would be surprised that 300,000 can actually be spent, just knowing all the hurdles that an individual business would have to jump through and prove.
Right, that could be the main question.
Well, the logistics of the paperwork in 6 or 8 weeks is.
But we do have, particularly with our CDBG, CV funds, we have heard through the grapevine that there is more assistance that people are looking for. particularly on the business side, so we do think, again, conservatively, we feel good about that 300K.
I mean, we could split it up between different organizations.
Question, is there a checklist that businesses or former businesses could obtain as far as what would be the criterias they would have to meet to be able to apply? So they know upfront what criteria that they need to put down and
To show loss.
to show loss for
Yeah, I'm sure there's a
these types of
standard.
funds?
I would guess that Berkeley included that in there.
Like an eligibility
Yeah.
checklist.
Yeah.
Well, or if we're talking about eligibility for the program under revenue replacement, we have a lot more leeway to design our own program. But for just parties that would be seeking to recover losses related to the pandemic under the traditional negative economic impact expenditure category, the US Treasury website would have guidance on small businesses seeking recovery under that.
That's what they need to show.
Right, I was just hoping or wondering that we could have something available if somebody came to City Hall, maybe we can print it off the website. And if people came in, just to inquire, we would be able to say, this is a checklist you would have to go through with your business to make sure you're eligible for anything. If you can't meet this checklist, then you wouldn't be eligible. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was looking, there he is. So I think that also the expectation would be that the third party selected to administer that $300,000 would be conversant with, knowledgeable about those things, and we could certainly supplement that with information from Bricker Graydon and otherwise also to make sure that people
Great.
do have that information.
Great, okay, thank you.
All right, well, I think we've heard loud and clear here the direction which jives with what you were proposing, so thank you for that.
And Mr. President, if I may, I'm sorry, Eric, also just on that question of a decision, I wanted to go back and look to make sure we weren't changing something that was specifically decided by council and we're not, which is sort of the background to my question. Essentially, the administration has recommended these three, with the left-hand side of that prior slide being the recommendation, and council has indicated at least no objection to proceeding that way and has identified that it understands some of the benefits of that. So you don't have to do anything unless you want the administration to not pursue that.
I understand.
There'll be contracts.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question, Bill, and
Sure.
you've got the ARPA legislation.
Right.
So there is a provision in there where council made general allocations. It's in the beginning, it says it expressly reserves the right to determine the programs and make reallocations. So does that require us to at least pass a resolution signing off on what is being proposed? Is that section,
I'm looking
Did
at
you find it?
179-2023.
can I slide over?
Sure. I mean, it's okay with me, I have to check the
I have his password.
Is it a recital or?
Wait, look what he's looking at.
I was just looking at.
Sections 4 and 5, I believe.
Yeah, there are certain allocations that did not require coming back to council and then others that did require coming back. to
I'll
council.
have to
Sure.
find
It's
it.
near the bottom of page 2. City
just
Council
had it.
expressly reserves the right to determine and approve the specific programs and expenditures accompanying those general allocations.
And those are the ones that indicate on the list of the potential allocations moving forward. There are some that indicate that it doesn't require going back to council and others that indicate that it does. If I remember correctly.
Do you want me to send you a link to it?
Oh, I have it. I'm just locked out of my computer.
Which document is that, Councilman?
This is 179-2023 that I got from the city's website. And it's, as I think it was Chris who said, sections 4 and 5, which are near the bottom of page 2.
Okay.
Did you find it? I got it here. Sorry.
It's not a touchscreen.
Well, that's the city laptop. To the extent it doesn't have a touchscreen.
Okay. Sorry, what I received from downstairs was not the final version. So let me see.
That
Now? No. Let's see.
If I might, we specifically added that provision to make sure that once the programs were finalized or developed, that council would have to sign off on.
And I think that still so I would agree that that's a reservation of that authority. I would still say that doesn't require any action by council today. But thank you.
So looking at this legislation, section 3 says all awards to any third-party recipients, so presumably that would be, included here. It says recipients are conditioned upon A, the approval of the specific use by Guidehouse Inc., and B, yada, yada, yada. So do we need to modify that since we're no longer?
We could do that, I think, in one fell swoop.
Okay.
So the administration understands based on this discussion that it'll be pursuing the left-hand side of that page, and we'll come back to council for further legislative action.
Well, I think this would be as good of a time as any for me to interject this. In this grand move to move millions of dollars to revenue replacement, I can tell you as one council person, I would definitely want, as part of that legislation, to be that council signs off on the programming, because that's the only guarantee that the programming would be in the spirit of what the allocation from December of 2023 would, we otherwise, it can be changed in a way. And I'm not saying the administration would do it on purpose, but I mean, we're the ones that know, what it was we were thinking about and putting in with, because we don't get into the granular details, obviously, in that, in the actual legislation, but now that the administration will be getting into those details, we want to sign off on that. I just throw that out.
And I know our intent was always to include at least the rules and regulations in whatever we needed to bring forward. Now, whether you need to approve those rules and regulations, I think will work with law, or if it's just approving the legislation with that as an exhibit. But definitely hear what you're saying.
Actually, Mr. President, I know what I think, so I'll ask for clarification. But my understanding of what you're saying is that the basic, aim, and not basic as in completely broad stroke, but the aim of the program, the sort of general method of the program, but you're not anticipating that council would sort of sign off on the form that gets completed or.
No, here's what, I'll give you an example, it's probably the best I can do. If the exterior repair program eliminated garages, driveways, and sidewalks, I wouldn't be for that, because I know what I was, and I'm just gonna assume everybody that put something forward, there's a lot of us did, would be like, okay, this is missing the original intent. But no, not the forms.
And I didn't think so, but I just wanted to clarify.
No, fair enough.
So sort of in the same category, but quite different, the CIC is one of the areas of allocation was $300,000. And of course, the issue right now is that the CIC, based on some legislation that you passed earlier this year, increased in size, but now doesn't have enough people to count for. So hopefully there's some legislation that's gonna be coming forward to at least get one person on the CIC. But the intent here, in order to minimize our risk and get things done in the ARPA timeframe, would be to appoint an interim executive director at no cost and sort of charge that executive director with a search for the executive director. And then also whatever's left over have available for property acquisition. We think this could be done through legislation treating the CIC as a nonprofit. So like the other nonprofits, it would be the allocation and all the rules that went along with those other nonprofits. So essentially, once the CIC can meet, accept, or sign the application, then they could, or the allotment, then that could happen. So this is one that's risky in the sense that the CIC as a body can't meet right now, but hopefully in the next month, that would be resolved. Yes.
Mr. President, just to clarify on this, over the last couple of years, this is pretty much the intent of what we discussed in terms of getting it off the ground, getting it organized, getting a professional in there to really build out what that looks like in that staff work. And so this is absolutely what we discussed, at least in the first 2 years of being on council in terms of CIC and planning and development and what that process looks like. Just for clarity, this literally lays the groundwork for being able to lift up and prop up everything else that the CIC does. And so without that work, you really don't see those other layers. And so this is precisely what the original intent was when the CIC met last in terms of what that looks like moving forward. So we're real happy to see that.
Oh, please.
Is it the case that aside from the influence that council members on the board of the CIC might have, that this body is unable to sort of direct the CIC and how much of that $300,000 they pay executive director?
Well, there would be 2 members of council
Right.
that would be on the CIC itself. So that would be the head of the Planning and Development Committee and the council president. So that is your influence, so to say, and the appointments, of course, as well. But yeah, the idea is that it's a independent body that's able to make use of its funds. But that would go mostly towards the executive director position for, let's say, the 2-year period, and then potentially property acquisition.
It just seems to me that, was I
No, go ahead, no.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, if this has been hanging out there from council's wishes from, a year ago, I mean, 2023, it just seems to me that there needs to be a higher sense of urgency to get this resolved. I mean, get this thing in place and up and running. Is there anything council can do to speed this along a little bit?
I can answer that. If council wanted to approve my appointments immediately, I'd be fine with that. And then we could get that show on the road. We got, I think, 3 that will be before council, or will be before council right now.
You need more than
Out
3.
of the 5.
Oh, 3 out of
Yeah,
5.
there's 5.
You need just
5
one.
total. We just need one,
need just
frankly, in order to have a quorum, but you know, I personally, of course, I don't see the harm because I'm biased, but council will go through its process, and I know that some of that is determining its process for making these appointments, but in terms of the urgency in getting this done, I think that there's time within the month of September to appropriately vet these candidates, and at the second regular meeting of council in September, I would assume approved because they are, qualified, conscientious individuals. And upon that approval, if council does approve those appointments, then we can, meet, accept the funds, and begin the process.
Just as a transparent part of this, because I don't want to spring this up since we're on here, council is going to be getting a request soon for me to join the CIC as a non-official voting member, so I can continue that work as well to help move this process along. It's one of the reasons that I really wanted to have my hands on that, to continue that process, and so I don't want to throw anybody off. That'll be coming up at a council meeting, so.
Regarding the executive director, that search, will council have to approve, will it still go through the same process?
No.
CIC.
CIC?
Okay, so Councilman Petrus had asked earlier about revenue replacement, so here is our list, and I'll have maybe Brian or Tara walk us through the things that have already been allocated and some shifts that we
Yeah,
think.
some shifts. So We start off with some things that we know for sure, the hybrid police vehicles, the ice rink rebuild. King Park Strip, we believe that could be part of the bucket one of the use. Because it's an outdoor activity, it's access to an outdoor park, park vehicle enhancement, that would need to be revenue replacement, police equipment, the upfitting of 4 police vehicles. So Coventry and Lennox, those need to be revenue replacement, except for there's portions of it that we believe could be taken out, which are ventilation related or touchless surfaces, like the button you just wave your hand in front of kind of thing. But the rest of it would need to be a revenue replacement because it doesn't fit into the other buckets. Shipping container project, one of those council projects, would need to be, as well as we get to the tiny homes later. Compton Road Greenway, we believe that could be a combination of bucket 1 and bucket 6. So bucket 1 is negative impacts of the pandemic, bucket 6 is surface transportation. So there's aspects of that project that are involved. We talked about lead safe programming, 400,000 out of that 1 million would need to be revenue replacement. That allows us to do the healthy homes and our lead remediation through and past 2026. Down payment assistance is the amount that's not gonna be spent by HRC by the end of 2026. Exterior home repair, that's the amount that wouldn't be under contract by the end of the year, as well as the amount that HRC believes they could spend out of the million for violations and accessibility. Economic development program, that's assuming the first option is the way we go. 900,000 would be revenue replacement, the rest would be under contract with third party. Tiny homes doesn't fit in a eligible use category, but that could be revenue replacement, same with the CIC, and then the rest are the nonprofits that were moved to revenue replacement, particularly at the suggestion of our ARPA consultant, Berkeley Gray.
So you see the number here is slightly under that 10 million. However, turn it to Tara for a second to talk about best practices.
So best practice is not to do the whole 10 million right away. You wanna leave a cushion for the next couple of years. So if we get a federal single audit, which we will, because we're gonna spend over $750,000 of feds money in a year, is that they'll come in and if they're looking at these projects and find something in that project that shouldn't be under ARPA, we could have a cushion in the revenue replacement.
So 500,000 was allocated for both garages. Tell me what happened to the 50 again?
It could be more. So in consultation with Brooker Graydon's, parts of those projects could be considered bucket 1. So it's the sort of like public health, which would be ventilation and such as.
I see.
And it could be more than 50,000 until we have a itemized sort of estimate or bid back.
Do we have estimates for the 2 garages? So
Coventry just went out to bid.
okay. And what about
I'll have to follow up on Lennox.
Lennox? Okay.
Is that Surrey Lennox?
Yeah.
That's been bid, that project has been awarded, and that project is set to start at the end of September or the beginning of October, or beginning of October.
And what
So
bid was,
that project has already been bid and awarded.
and what was the amount of that?
It was about 400,000, but there is a contingency included in it.
That's Lennox.
That's a Lennox, Surrey Lennox parking garage, yes.
Contingency on
Or something
discovering
that they may find.
unintended or not unintended. Yeah, got it. All right.
Tony.
Oh, yeah,
So
sorry.
if I could, just for clarification, so the entire repair may cost as little as 400,000?
Yes.
Unless there's a contingent, okay, great. And then also, so Director Zamp, am I understanding correctly? So that $9.8 million figure, that is based on current allocations, and that includes the 1.5 million for the Stramp and the 250,000 for the Compton Road Greenway. But we are reclassifying those, so the actual amount will be less than 9.8.
So the crossed out ones have been removed from that.
Okay, so previously it was above 10 million then? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So that was what we were up against, is we actually above.
Trying to recap, okay.
And this is, I mean, further discussion needs to happen on this.
Okay, so these are all the categories that you're recommending for replacement revenue?
either they were already assigned that through council legislation previously or our
They
recommendation.
need to be.
Yeah, some of them, like the ice rink is done.
No, I understand, but I know some of them are contingent on public hearing.
Shipping containers are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shipping containers is based on public hearing.
Yeah, so we'll get to shipping containers and tiny homes in just a couple of slides.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to just make sure we,
As far as time goes, where are we at? I mean, I mean, I know what time it
We're near
is.
the end of the presentation.
Yeah, we're just a couple more.
Oh, okay, yeah.
wait.
Oh, go ahead, Director.
If I can add for the Surrey Lennox parking garage too, any design or construction management that may be required would be included in that amount.
Oh, that's good.
It's not included in your full,
Not in the 400,000.
yeah.
You said it's not,
It's in addition, but I don't expect that it'll be over the 50,000. That
Right.
450 should cover everything.
okay.
So are there other buckets you're gonna be using non-profit money for? I hope that came out right.
The
The
nonprofits,
ones that aren't listed there are in eligible use categories currently.
but
Ineligible.
but those that are listed.
Eligible.
Ineligible.
They're within
Within.
So
Got it.
they don't fall within the revenue replacement,
Placement, but there's
Yes.
another bucket that they fall under.
they're already in, yes.
Yeah,
This is what I need to know.
like Family Connections, Journey Center,
Okay,
they're not.
good.
President Kuda,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
one of the budget changes we made in December of 2023 was $1 million for the Kane Park dressing rooms, which we're gonna pay with ARPA funds. So I'm trying to make sure I've got my buckets straight in my head. Which bucket is that coming out of?
So we do have a slide in a second, it might even be this one, yes. So
Thank you.
let me turn it to you guys, and actually Law is could probably chime in on the park side of it as well. Here's all the other city projects that are ARPA funded, and we wanted to give you a status of them, and we can even say, you know, which bucket they're coming out of, so we can start with.
So the $18 million for sewer infrastructure, we plan to have all of that funding committed by the end of the year. And we hope to include a couple of water projects in with that 18 million.
Director, by October 31st, would that go?
No, as
Okay.
the finance director has been made aware, that we plan to have all of that committed by the end of November.
Well, Sam. Somebody else had their hand up.
Okay, so parks, if you guys want to talk to that, I know who the best person is.
So in the absence of the Parks Director, so the certain amount was designated to all three of those parks, Kane Park, Edison Park, Forest Hills. We also are aware of major accessibility issues at all of our parks. We'd like to address that with any remaining fund. This is all bucket one. We believe the dressing rooms still is part of bucket one, right? No?
Well, no, and
Portions
now
of-
it's, that is something we'll have to circle back to.
Okay. But anything that's for outside activity, so I'm sure the ticket booth part of it would be, but not necessarily the literal dressing rooms.
We'll get back to you
Yeah,
on
we'll
that.
have to adjust it. What else are we trying to cover here?
So the other projects, maybe, Terry, you wanna walk through those?
So for the Kane Park, you guys already approved the heart design for $96,000. The admin and dressing rooms are estimated at $1 million. The amphitheater roof is $432,800. So Kane Park, we still have about $871,000 of the 2.4 that you allocated to Kane Park to still work with. And I don't know if there's any ideas out there, this is all I had.
Yeah, we do have a need for some supplemental funding
And
for the Kane Park
the-
playground.
yeah, the Kane Park playground came way over what was allocated through CDBG. And to make it ADA accessible and to do it right the first time around, we're probably gonna use some of that ARPA money left of the 871,000.
Over 100, right, is my recollection.
Yeah, probably, the estimate's around 150.
I think 100, yeah.
Yeah,
So there were also 400,000 allocated for sound lights and multimedia. I don't think that's happened yet.
No, but there's still, like I said, there's
Is that it?
871,
Oh,
if we
that's
take
in
out
there.
the playground, if we do the lighting, that's another 400, so there's still some money left. And with the Kane Park Stramp, there were other,
There's the potential to have to relocate the basketball court due to the Stramp, not necessarily because of the Stramp, but because of the hillside.
yeah,
And so that is something that's being considered as part of that that Kane Park allocation.
okay, so then Dennison Park, we still have the $400,000, I'm not sure if we have anything with that yet.
pickleball,
It was supposed to go to tennis courts, basketball courts.
255, I think, the
Is
cost
it
of that,
255?
Excuse me.
which is out to bid now.
It has been, we received the bid for the pickleball.
Okay,
I have to check,
Sure.
but it is in the process.
Yeah.
It's like the item
Close to
off the
being
bid
listed.
or
Upgrading.
about to be open, the pickleball court.
The pickleball.
Is that what's there? Yeah.
I'm wondering about the ADA accessibility of the playground there.
Kane Park.
No, Dennison,
Oh, Dennis.
if that's something that could be considered.
Yeah, I think one of the most things in need accessibility wise is clear pathways to different activities.
Yeah.
That for sure.
Not
It's
through,
a prime priority, not only of ARPA, but CDBG this year as well.
thank you.
And the Forest Hill, $240,000. I don't know if we've done anything at Forest Hill yet. And then the remaining 500,000 that was allocated for all the parks, we used part of that for
Compton Road.
the Compton Road.
So there's more work here obviously to be done on parks, particularly to get that stuff contracted.
But it's all outside stuff,
It is all.
outside of the bid
It's all-
spec writing.
So actually, so when you say it's outside, but there's still, you don't need to go through a contracting process because you'll be doing the work internally, is that?
No, it would need, most of this would be bid out, I think, the vast majority of it.
When he said outside, he meant physically outside,
No, I
almost
also
over
meant
bucket.
outside company,
Outside,
is the
yes.
contractor.
third parties.
I think come to the funds.
So without a director in the rec space, and it seems like the parks are underneath that space, I mean, did you have adequate resources on staff to get that work done, and are you tracking it? And again, what can we do as council to help facilitate that?
To be honest, in the last 2 months with the parks, I feel the whole team as a whole has moved this forward, because before that, there was nothing really done. I think that's fair.
If I could just interject a little bit, there are certain things that I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to say, but I would like to at least express my appreciation for the team at Parks and Rec, who I believe now are less inhibited by certain negative components of that team, and I think that we have more confidence in their ability to achieve the goals than we did previously.
It just seems to me that's of these, I mean, there's not even dollar amounts here on this slide. I'm just looking for some assurances that, you know, the team is working, and you're obviously got a sheet there, so it's being tracked.
Yeah, and we're all assisting
We all,
parks.
yeah.
It's good to hear. I mean, we, you know, I think
Particularly Director Clunes.
well, it's a team effort. Everybody, we're all a member of this team, but we want to be supportive on trying to make sure that this work gets done, so, you
We're
know,
not
no
returning
money's,
anything.
yeah, so money's not lost, and, you know, the city's benefiting from it, obviously.
Director Schuster, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And the bids were open for the pickleball court last Friday.
Oh, okay.
So we got the bids in and we'll be evaluating the bids. There were 2 bidders, so.
Pickleball lovers will love that.
There's a lot of
Yes,
Director
it is.
Schuster, am I understanding correctly, did I hear correctly that there's 500,000 for the remainder of the parks not specified up here, and about $250,000 is going to the Compton Road Greenway?
Correct.
So there's about another $250,000 remaining.
350. I think only 100,000 or so.
So the Compton Road,
We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, there's gonna be some money left over from Compton Road Greenway.
yeah.
Okay,
But yeah, according to the allocation, it's.
do you want us to bring up preferences now or hold on to them until?
Hold on, let's.
Okay.
Yeah, cause we probably actually need to know a total dollar. It's gonna be.
Let's talk through the other projects. We could probably do some of those pretty quickly.
I mean, a lot of this is self-explanatory.
Premium pay.
Yeah, so firefighter, paramedic premium pay, that was already done. Same with the outfitted for vehicles, that's already been done, or it's in process.
It's in the process, it's almost done.
Same with the gym equipment, guidehouse, that's already been spent. You don't know?
Question, Mr. President.
Please.
Have they received the final payment from the city? Guidehouse, yes.
Yes.
And can we honestly say that we got value for what we spent? Any consideration of trying to claw any of that money back?
I think that maybe a determination about what it would mean to claw money back. I wanna have a conversation with the law director about that, this might not be the setting to do that.
It's probably not the setting. Also, the focus of the group has been trying to spend the rest of these dollars in this shorter period of time.
Because the next bullet point is pretty important, Brick and Graydon, I'm almost close to spending the first $50,000. There's a plus sign, because we'll definitely need their assistance throughout the whole grant period. Right. So the plus sign is important. There's 2 ambulance purchases that has already been approved by council. Right?
It's already been encumbered, ordered.
And the last one's safety camera equipment, that's the one that does have a tangential broadband benefit for the cameras.
Mr. President, question on the safety camera. That 400,000, I seem to recall that we got some money from the county.
500.
Yep, that whole entire project, the money that the city put in, this ARPA and from Cuyahoga, that's all been contracted, encumbered, that's already aside.
But were you asking about whether this is straight 400 or whether it's being reduced by
The
contributions?
400,000, was that council's allocation or is, okay, and then another question, and
And I think in the regular capital improvement projects for 2024, you actually put additional money to that project.
okay.
As like an ongoing.
And have those contracts gone out for the new cameras?
Yes, everything
Yeah. I thought it did last year, yep.
And
We're
then-
in the installation phase.
Okay, and I lost it, but we had allocated 750,000 in the legislation for a number of items.
Yeah, that's gonna be,
Safety lighting.
Is that coming up?
that'll be on the next slide.
Okay, sorry.
I agree with Council Person Cobb. I mean, I think we need to dig a little deeper into Guidehouse, not in this setting, but we need to, figure out what went wrong and see if we can get some recourse on that. Isn't police locker rooms on this list someplace?
No, we moved that out of the ARPA and put it into the general fund because it was the prime.
Honestly, the ARPA restrictions were onerous and not really well suited for that particular project, the way that it had been generated in the first place. So we asked council to remove that from ARPA so that we could do it in a different way.
Is it still being worked on?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We did want to touch base today on the 2 sort of outstanding nonprofits, which are housing related, and that's Future Heights as Future Homes program and the Revitalization program, and then Start Rights 2 programs. So I'll turn this over to speak just briefly about, there have been some conversations. We're trying to determine the eligibility.
Well, essentially with Start Right CDC, the eligibility issues, the core one that there's no getting around is the prohibition of all ARPA funds, whether revenue replacement or in one of the other buckets, on using the funds towards debt service or loan repayments. So even doing it as a revenue replacement project, as Start Right had proposed, and even without the Cornerstone Fund participating, there would still be a part of their plan that would necessitate the use of ARPA funds for paying debt service on basically construction mortgages that would finance the building of the houses. So that is one problem. There's, at least from the earlier proposals from Start Right, there's no getting around. The other issue with getting the Start Right proposals under one of the non-revenue replacement buckets is that the ARPA requirements mandate certain restrictive covenants that follow with the property, such as they can only be rented or sold within a certain price range and only to certain individuals of certain income ranges. In this case, at least as of today, it would be at or below 120% of the average median income for that territory where it's built in. And that didn't, at least according to Start Right, it didn't jive with their total development plan for the Caledonia Homes Infill, or I believe the Good Neighbor project.
Because of the thresholds that we're spending per unit versus our HPO and HRC programs are much lower.
Sheesh.
And with respect to Future Heights, we would need a lot of clarification as to what it is they're actually proposing. The proposal that they submitted to council sort of highlighted a lot of things they could do, but at least my understanding is that in earlier discussions with Future Heights through Guidehouse, there was never really any core function that was nailed down out of everything that they proposed. And so, you know, with respect to engaging Future Heights, it would really be a matter of what would council want them to do.
If it's literal rehabbing of homes or building of homes, and the money's going straight to labor and materials, and then maybe a developer's fee, that kind of thing would be eligible. I think the current creativity that they used in their applications made things more complicated.
Because it's not defined.
Partially because it's not defined and because there's different mechanisms, like Start Right's using the Cornerstone Fund and the different mechanisms. So a straight up purchase rehab, straight up build a house, those things could work out.
So thank you for sharing some of the concerns regarding these two allocations. I think that it's important that we reach a resolution as soon as possible with these. So could you help us to understand what the next steps are here? Because for example, in the case of Future Heights, I heard from someone that they were in maybe June told that the city was going to provide like a list of services that the city might want Future Heights to do. So could you help us to understand what the next steps are here and when we plan to know for sure what's going to happen with these?
I would have to reiterate my question as, what do you want Future Heights to do? Anybody?
Which relates back to what you said about the prior references to discussions with the consultant and then
Right.
the need for somebody to tell them.
So will someone make a recommendation to us, or do we need to start coming up with ideas to provide to
I
them?
find that an odd role for council to recommend what a nonprofit does.
I wanna disagree with that, here's why. These projects, and this is something that I discussed when we started this, from a planning and development standpoint, are problematic if you're talking about building the vision and the strategy for the CIC as well. There would end up being some overlap. And So one of the questions that I had was, if we're gonna fund this CIC to do this work and utilize these properties and move forward, then what is the position or the place that this council sees these organizations taking that place in this community, and what does that look like? And only council can really make that decision. Because what we're essentially doing right now is we're funding the CIC and we're empowering to do much of this work, but we have not clarified what our other partners in the community may do instead of that. Because as of right now, you're going to see duplicative efforts, and I don't think that anything is gonna be successful that way. And so if the CIC is gonna drive that and drive our homes process, then we need to ask, well, what gap are they filling, or is there something else or some other type of program we have an expectation for them to do? But as long as we are empowering and funding the CIC to continue to do this work without clarifying this any further, you're gonna run into some issues. And city staff, tell me if I'm wrong, but I do know that there's, based on what this and what many of their goals are, there's overlap in many of the goals and the outlines and the strategy for the CIC. I see that. So I think council needs to clarify what expectations, if any, or what we want to do with these organizations, knowing that coming down, because we're about to fund it. It's moving forward. We're about to put someone else in that CIC. That work is going to overlap. And I think Start Right and Future Heights have both come to us in the last couple of years to even try to get clarification and understanding of what the CIC would do versus what they're doing in the city. So I think it's high time for us to really have a conversation about what role do we see them playing versus what we're doing in terms of empowering and standing up the CIC in the city.
Well, go ahead.
With all of the properties that need attention in this city, I think there's room for at least one other CDC to work with CIC to move more of these streets forward. I really, there is a place for at least one more CDC.
And we've had a public discussion about that there was so much work to be done
Yeah.
that, and I remember having it at this table, that the nonprofits, CDCs would be considered partners with the CIC. I do think maybe a discussion about what that could look like, but I don't know that eventually we say to a CDC, here's what you need to do, but we can certainly make recommendations about where the needs are so that they're aware of that when they're doing their strategic planning and so forth. But I don't know, Rhonda, do you want to say anything about this?
Sure, absolutely. I think,
Explain who you are, just.
okay. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm one of the co-presidents of Future Heights, which is the CDC in Cleveland Heights. So great, that's a wonderful thing. What I've heard, can you hear me? Oh, okay. I'm Rhonda Lovejoy, and I'm one of the co-presidents of Future Heights, the CDC in Cleveland Heights. What I heard today is some parts of what we've heard from you or others that are in the room. I think I heard scope of work, which is one of the one of the last conversations that we were having with the city about what the expectations were for Future Heights, because we certainly want to follow the city's lead. We want to make sure that we are doing work that the city wants us to do. That's very important, right? So having clarification on what that looks like, of course, is gonna only help us. Now, we can come up with, some partnerships, and I think there were some proposals on the table with different developers or so forth that you guys are familiar with, that we've worked with in the past and so forth in order to collaborate with. But we certainly wanna know that again is what the city wants. We wanna know what those target homes are, what the areas are, where do we need the most help. We can do that. We can go out and send, persons who may be familiar with where the vacancies are and so forth, and let them identify them and then bring them to our attention for us to sit back and give back to you to say, hey, do you want us to work on these properties here? Or you want us to work with these properties on the south side, the north side? Where is it? Are we overlapping where Start Right is doing work? We don't want to do that. So we just want to have that clarification, know that we're in the ballpark for what it is that the city wants to have done. That's the best thing Future Heights could possibly know. So when we get that information, then of course we would go to step 1, step 2, step 3, and actually organize and put a timeline. And like you said, President Kuda put a strategic plan together in terms of what that's gonna look like over a period of time, so that you would be aware of that and the community would be aware of that. The second phase of that would be, of course, community engagement and making sure that the community is involved in making the decisions about what happens in their neighborhood. So that's our role, that's our place, but we wanna make sure that we're doing it the way the city wants us to.
And I think from the administration's perspective, there was a bit of hesitance, I think, in putting our perspective in place of yours, since council, is making the allocation. We'd like to make sure that, whatever the scope of work ends up being in the contract, that it reflects what council's goals are specifically for these dollars.
I was talking with the law director, and I think to Council Petrus's point, we can, as an immediate next step, is set up a couple of meetings with Future Heights and StartRight to talk about some of the concerns and issues that have come up through the eligibility, and talk a little bit about scope of work, and then bring back to you for that more informed discussion about overall goals at a future.
I think we should move on, but I would just say that when I got on council 2 years and 8 months ago, I met with HRC, Future Heights, and StartRight. And the one thing that the three of them all said was, give us more houses to rehab. We don't, we want more, we're waiting. So that I don't think that ever changed over time. I mean, if it ends up being other needs as well, I'm sure that the entities can get together and that can be communicated, but I felt like that was clear at least the whole time I was on council, or at least that one thing.
That's sort of my understanding of council's sort of conversation related to this. Frankly, there are, few properties with structures for rehab that the city even owns. There are many more that these CDCs could source in other ways throughout the city. And I think that's an additional, if they're gonna be funded at such a high level, then, using that funding for those things might be an important thing to consider, for council to consider.
We've got a few more slides and I wanna get
So just
I'm sorry.
the conversations that you'll have with Future Heights, you're going to have those with StartRight as well?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I meant both of them if I
And I
did.
just had one question. Have Future Heights and StartRight been notified that they need to readjust their application or form, or what was the problem with it? Or has any conversations with them? I understand what happened with Future Heights because of the director, but bringing in an updated application or critiquing the current one that they put in that you're saying does not fit the criteria?
So we have made some progress. There was, when we started out, so from the time council approved StartRight, for example, till when the actual initial discussion started taking place with them under Guidehouse, StartRight wanted to bring in another entity called Cornerstone Fund that would act as some sort of like two-spoked fiduciary for them to handle the money, but also as the lender for the project. This created all sorts of issues from an ARPA perspective. And so since then, StartRight just came forward and said, we don't need Cornerstone Fund to participate in this project. So when we went back to consult with Bricker, really the feedback we got back was there are still these two key issues. One being the debt service, and two being the restrictive covenants if you want the program to be under the first bucket.
So that has been articulated to them, to StartRight, that they need to look into that?
No, we need to circle back with StartRight. We wanted to
That's
make
what I mean.
sure- Yeah,
That's
we were
what
briefed
the
first.
planning director was just referencing, that conversation still needs to take place.
Oh, it has not, okay, thank you.
So recommendations for reallocation. And I wanna start on the right-hand side here, if that's okay, because that's a little bit easier. So as I mentioned earlier, the Compton Road Greenway, we have about 251 allocated, and ultimately it's gonna be more around 205, 210, I think, when all is said and done. So there will be funds left over from that project. Same thing with the ice rink, it was, Terry, help me out.
It's like
1.8 and change.
Well, the floor wasn't included, so it was about 1.7.
So there'll be some leftovers from that. So those are funds that will need to be reallocated. And that's sort of an easy conversation. On the other side, we've got the safety lighting blue boxes, which I think is what Councilman Cobb was referring to. And then the park vehicle enhancement project. Both of these are projects that remain undefined to us as the administration. So either we're looking for some additional input from you all, or think about those two allocations being something reallocated for an additional purpose.
Just if I can clarify for the council, that park vehicle enhancement that came from me, that's one of those things we're talking about in terms of safety forces being able to move through those parks and maneuver much better than just bringing through SUVs and making sure that they have the equipment and supplies, not just our safety forces, but our park staff as well as we're engaging with the public. So they allow us just not only move through the parks, but during special events and things. And so that was part of that shipping containers is how do we better engage with the public, but that's where those park vehicles come from. So you're not looking at in many cases, you're not looking at full-blown vehicles, but much smaller ATVs and things like that that they can use to maneuver through those parks.
And the safety lighting blue boxes came from me. Those are about so much lighting in the parks and having a safe haven where people are getting in trouble or having issues. You see them at a lot of the hospitals where people can actually hit the blue box and it has a light where police know where to come and identify a person who's having trouble.
And Mayor, I don't know if you want to speak, because we did have a conversation internally, and police in particular felt that the blue box is not something.
There was some not concern, there was some skepticism that in today's day and age that the utility of those boxes is maximized. But that is not to say that there isn't a space for or a use for sort of sorting out the possibility of including something like that in a future park design. But I think the sort of the urgency of it, according at least to police, didn't seem terribly strong in terms of how people generally end up contacting police or emergency services generally. But I like I said, I don't necessarily believe that there is no place for this kind of utility in our parks. I think you can consider a scenario where somebody gets their cell phone taken, how do they then contact the police, right? And that happens. And so but I think the immediate urgency and the dollar figure was something that I don't think that we could have even planned for over this past year basically to get that accomplished just from a capacity standpoint, and certainly not to get it contracted out.
And maybe we put actually all four of these sort of in the same bucket of so we've got the slide on council projects, which I think we need to probably have a separate session on to talk about what they are, how they fit in, and maybe how we can move them forward, but probably they have to remain as revenue replacement. So just suggest that maybe we schedule another work session to go over the reallocations in this. But we did want to spend a second talking about Ordinance 92 of 2021. It was one of the questions that the council put forward in prep for this meeting. And essentially, well, to recap, it's $5 million set aside geographically, $2 million for the Noble Road corridor area, undefined on this slide, $2 million for the Taylor Road area, undefined on this slide, and then $1 million set aside elsewhere in the city. And this is our attempt to show that if you consider infrastructure, which was listed in the ordinance, park improvements and the small business and residential assistance, that we're actually in good shape with all of those, if you count, all of the allocations and then some earmarks, which we discussed earlier in the different housing programs and small business programs. So if we make sure that, for example, 300,000 is allocated towards Noble and 300,000 is allocated for Taylor for lead safe, then we're doing that geographically.
Right, and we could change these numbers. I think I just
We don't have enough
sort
time
of
for me.
spitballed the small business assistance earmark. Now that
Not there.
now that we read the
Yeah.
legislation again, I think I would change those
Yeah.
a little bit. Maybe not to the full 400 because 200 is coming out of planning, but maybe 350 or 400, and then there's be 200 left for the rest of the cities. And they're pretty comparable too. What we didn't include is the water project that could be happening near Taylor Road. Would up that amount by what, 1.4, 1.2.
So I know we're
So
short on
that's
time, I just
2.9.
wanna.
Yeah, so the 2.9.
So moving forward, this is sort of our call to action slide. I think we've gotten the okay and the indication from you today on our city housing projects that what we proposed you're comfortable with. And on the economic development side, that option one was where you preferred to go. So we will now work on, I'll go to the next slide. We'll start working on legislation and all that backup documentation that's necessary to get that stuff effectuated. We'll issue our RFPs, et cetera. But there's also a couple of other pieces of legislation that we wanted to highlight, including amending Ordinance 140, 2021. I don't know, Director, if you want to speak to that one.
Yeah, that's principally just to clarify that water infrastructure in addition to sewer infrastructure is covered within that allocation of $18 million. It was eligible under ARPA. At the time, the focus was very directly on sewer work for a lot of reasons having to do with our EPA consent decree and related work. That's still gonna be the vast majority of that expenditure, but it did not specifically reference water, and so we wanna make sure that we have that ability.
And then whatever other ARPA related ordinances that need to
179.
be amended.
179, 2023.
The Bricker Graydon contract at 50,000 plus will need to come before you, the other contracts that are necessary to get the work done, and then the reallocations, the revenue replacement, which all ties into there will need to be eventually budget adjustments to reflect all of that shifting of money between general fund and ARPA. So just a reminder of the timeline, which is, to try to get this all done before the end of the year.
Well, October 31st for
all the bidding.
Go ahead, Council.
I just wanted to let council know, I've asked administration, we're gonna do it so that we have it for a work session, just so I can kind of get a sense of where to go with the shipping containers, with administration, what they're working on some of those outstanding projects that I brought forth to council. So as soon as I clean that up, I'll bring that back to council as well, but I wanna make sure I get that tightened up and ironed up so that you're not going around in circles for anything that I presented that council with. So as soon as I complete that with the administration and that work project, I'll kind of bring that back forth to get clarity on exactly what I'm looking at and where we can go from there.
So real quickly on the shipping containers, since you brought up, what, did you intend this to all be in the Noble neighborhood? Because I noticed that it was the whole amount was in the Noble.
So we initially, the first shipping container would have been a test at Denison, and then to see, that's why it's allocated.
Test.
Yep, that's why the funds are allocated to see, once we purchase them, what that looks like and if we can possibly drop another one in another area. We also allocated funds not just for the containers themselves, but for the surrounding area around that, anything that they need to do in terms of construction and supplies, especially if we had a container, for instance, that was doing some type of emergency services or community engagement, to make sure that they had funding to be able to put that together as well. And that's why I want to go back to the administration to see what that might look like. But initially, yep, the test project was in Denison with enough funding to take a look at another park to see if there was another place to do another one once we did that.
He was ahead.
Yeah.
So, just doing my math with shipping containers, blue lights, the park vehicle, the future homes, the start right, that's nearly $2 million worth of monies, in my opinion, that are highly at risk at this point. So we need a plan B. Or better, it seems to me that I mean, you look at the blue light, that was a very, very clear, this is what the expectation was. And, you know, if you needed to reallocate that money, I think this body should have known about it sooner. Granted, you had Guidehouse that wasn't guiding you, you've got good people that are guiding us now. But it just seems to me that there's just, I'm really worried about that. And I think someone needs to be thinking about a plan B. And I'm a little worried, just knowing how long it takes to get a meeting like this together. We can't wait another 30 days to be consulted, I think, on this.
Isn't Plan B to have it in revenue replacement? I mean, in a sense.
You're out of revenue replacement money, you just can't put that in there.
But weren't the monies you just talked about slated to be part of revenue replacement?
Some of it.
Some of it.
Not all.
Not all of it.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I guess my comment builds off of what Councilman Posh said. So did I hear correctly that your thought was that we would have another conversation about those reallocation slides? And if I did hear that correctly, how soon can we have that conversation? Because those seem like pretty big things that we ought to discuss.
And I wanna clarify, I don't know about the rest of that conversation, but the conversation I was discussing with those shipping containers, that's happening very soon. I'm scheduling that so that I can have that to bring back to this council in terms of getting that clarified, but I'm not quite sure how you wanna handle anything else. I just don't wanna drop what I offered council initially in the council's lap without doing that, so that'll be scheduled within the next week.
Is it a public meeting or?
It's a work session.
Okay.
We put this sub-bullet up here, vague on purpose reallocations, because we thought that that's an area where we could bring back to you some suggestions on how to reallocate the money. And if that's in a week or two, you know, I think we'd be prepared to have that work session and discuss at least those recommendations.
We have Plan Bs.
I hate that Guidehouse did what they did because I agree with Councilman Posh. Some of those things that council had did and asked about, if we would have known that they were not able to be done, or the administration didn't feel that it was something that it should be done, it should have been talked to us, we should have been told about it, so we could have had an opportunity to say, well, this is where we want this allocation to go. Or come up with something different versus just saying it all goes back to revenue. And then it's out of our hands of what happens to that
Well,
funds in a sense.
not if I have anything to say about it.
Okay, all right.
Because as I said in the contract for revenue replacement, all the programming should go through council.
Yeah.
And then the Plan B, and I think that's very timely question and very necessary. I mean, we did talk about, and granted in vague terms, other infrastructure needs in that bucket 6, I wanna say. Yeah, you know, I don't know where everybody stands on that. I know where I stand on it. And I'm for using ARPA funds for infrastructure needs. I mean, that's, you know, but I'm one person.
First of all, can we get a copy of this, please?
Yes.
It was really hard to take notes and try to remember it all. Second of all, Director Schuster, can we get an updated spreadsheet that we're using for ARPA tracking so we can see contracts issued, contracts returned, money expended to the especially the nonprofits?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also, it may be premature because we're still talking about moving some money around, but is there an outstanding balance of ARPA funds that hasn't been encumbered at all?
That might be up to that's in council's records, I believe.
So it was like $200-some thousand.
There's also a need for a further. For what?
Yeah.
For further finger.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so the LaParo Energy project that's actually on the agenda, they've earmarked pieces of their engagement that can be used as sort of like a safety valve to spend ARPA money toward in some of the COVID box 1. I would really not want to see us to have to go that route as an escape hatch. I mean, I think this money is once in a lifetime money that can be used for beautification, that can be spread across the city. You know, having us put it into the service garage which needs the work, but it's already funded with the Leparo project. I hope I'm pronouncing their name right. I would much rather see it to go some beautification project, and the first thing that comes to mind is roads. Maybe staff has a better idea, which I think we'd be open for, but I think when we start thinking about Plan B, because I think that is, in my opinion, Plan B, in our next presentation, can we start looking at where we're at with that? Because with roads, you can do a design build with a favorite contractor that you know is gonna give you a good a value. And again, this is a decision I think everybody at this table needs to be made. I'm only suggesting roads because that's sort of, in my opinion, a low-hanging, easy fruit. Maybe there's something else. I'd also like to just sort of really quickly whip in how much I'm thankful for this group. There's been question after question after question of where we are with an update in ARPA. Where are we? And I think with Brooker's first presentation to us and this follow-up presentation, my comfort level is so much better than it ever has been when it comes to ARPA. And I'm really grateful that the city is stepping up, looking at this, treating it with the sense of urgency that it is. And I really appreciate that work, just saying.
Well said. Anything else? Ms. Lovejoy?
I think my question may be obvious, or maybe someone already answered in terms of contacting Future Heights, setting up conversations so that we know what next steps are. And, just talking about all the specifics that need to take place, because it's been a while. We're going into September, right? And of course, being a nonprofit organization, we do have to open our doors every day. And that's something that I think is important to everybody in this room. Cleveland Heights does not need to lose a major nonprofit organization, not any of them really. We need to figure out ways that we can work more collaboratively across the city, across nonprofit organizations, right? Because those nonprofit organizations should be doing the work in the city that the city doesn't have to do, but they still want it done. Services that need to be implemented, that the city would want implemented, that the organizations themselves can get to, get on the ground and make sure those things happen. We should be talking about ways that we can expand the services of nonprofits, right? We wanna see them grow, especially CDCs. We want to see them grow and triple in whatever they're doing. We want to see them become self-sustaining. We wanna make sure that community members know the services that CDCs provide and they take advantage of them. That's really critical. And Cleveland Heights is a city that's on the map that other communities are looking at every day. So we wanna shine, and our nonprofit organizations help us do that.
And maybe what we do at our next, not obviously tonight, but our 2 weeks from tonight, or actually it'd be 2 weeks from yesterday, maybe we have the CDCs come in and talk to us in committee of the whole, and we'll give them some time to say, here's what we'd like to do.
I think that's really important, because each of these organizations should be following the city's lead. I mean, that's the way I see it. They should be following the city's lead in terms of what the city wants to have rolled out. Whatever the plan is, these are extra hands, these are extra boots on the ground. These are people who want to make sure that this city shines. So let's use these resources in the way that they, should be used. And when you count them all, when we put all of the nonprofits in one room and you look at it like, wow, these are all the resources in Cleveland Heights. What can we have them do? What should they be doing in the city? What do we want them to do for the residents in this community? What does that look like? We need to define what that looks like and work together. We should be one. Just one community.
Yeah.
I like the idea of having them come in and we have a discussion with them, but I also think that the CDCs need to have a vision of what they actually want, of what you want to do, so that you are bringing to the table.
And what you have the capacity to do.
Yeah, and with the capacity you have to do. So if whatever your vision is, whatever capacity you have, I think if you bring those ideals forward, that would give us a chance to maybe sketch out what or with the city, what we need or what
Yes.
we could help with.
Yes.
You know, because most nonprofits have a vision of a mission, a vision statement of what their goals are.
Yeah,
So
we all do, we
so-
have one.
So we need to know what those
Sure,
are.
that's beautiful. I like that, yep.
All right, anything else? Yes, please.
I was just wondering if we could take the moment here and try to schedule that follow-up work session. And we're thinking 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Is a good time for us, so a Monday before the council meeting.
Yeah, could we make it at 10?
No, we've got municipal services at 10,
Oh,
so we could do 11 to 1
same time.
on the 16th.
Well, I didn't hear anybody else say that's.
That's good.
His face.
Well, I don't wanna look at people's faces, I want them to speak up.
The 16th.
My phone is off.
Keeping in mind,
Turn it on.
if we need to zoom in, we can also, you know.
16th is good.
At 11.
Yeah, you're fine.
I mean, ideally, for example, today I used vacation time to come, so ideally, 4 p.m. or later would be best, but this is such an important conversation that I wanna make sure that it happens as soon as possible, so we accommodate it.
What day you said?
It's the 16th,
What?
Councilman Maddox, what
It's a Monday.
time wise?
11.
Anything works for me, I'm open.
11? Okay.
It's okay with me.
Just for clarity, while we're doing that, are we expecting CDCs to come in at a future council meeting, just in general, like the next council meeting, was that?
No, I was thinking the next council meeting, committee of the whole,
Not a special, not our.
not a special meeting.
Just the regular.
Do we need to add time to that meeting to make?
Well, I don't know, first thing I have to do is see if they're available and then, I don't know, if we really can't start before 6 o'clock.
One.
Well, the Vita schedule for one thing, she doesn't get off until 5:30.
Got it.
And then, I don't know, there's any other problems.
No, that's not even. You said 11 o'clock on the 16th?
All right, well, if there's nothing else.
One request.
Here's
If you
all.
have any more slides, can we get them ahead of time, just so we can write on them? It just makes it a little more easier. Thank you. And I would like a copy of the ones we just did.
Yeah, he's gonna put them up, yeah.
I'm fine with the CDCs coming in, I just appreciate it if we had any discussions with those CDCs at that table together, not any side conversations with any of these organizations. I don't wanna feel like I'm walking into anything with them, and so if we wanna keep this open, I also would like to see some kind of clarification of what that conversation is gonna be surrounding the topics and subjects. I don't want anyone coming in here feeling like we're telling them they're getting a wish list, assuming because they said it, it's going to happen. So I just wanna set those clear expectations moving into that meeting.
Well, I mean, I think that's, as far as I don't think we should pre-discuss what we're gonna discuss at the meeting, but we talk all that. I don't know about you guys, I talk to them all the time. But this specifically, I'm gonna instruct them that what the purpose of the meeting is, so that they're prepared to, engage in that topic. All right, if there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.